Okay, so we're in James chapter 1, and we're going to begin getting into the text a little bit more this evening. We really had the introductory material last week, and really the only thing we got into was down in verse 2, where it says, "My brethren, count it all joy when you fall into various trials." We talked about kind of how odd a statement that is, really. Whenever you have trials, whenever you have things that make your life difficult, you just count the joy. And the concept there is not don't ever feel sad, or don't ever be frustrated, or don't ever have any of those negative emotions. You just kind of shut that part of you off and live your life always happy. That's not the point. That word count there means to take the lead. And what you're really doing is you're making a decision that as you go through trials, at the front of your mind, you're going to remember there's a joy in this. There's something good that will come out of this, which is still a very, very difficult thing to do. And so what what James is doing here is James is going to lay out why we should count it all joy. What is it about trials for a Christian? Remember, this book is written to Christians. And he'll say over and over again, brethren, brethren, brethren. And he says there in verse 2, "Consider it all joy, my brethren." So it's to Christians. What is it about being a Christian that makes it so that you can go through a difficult thing and find something positive out of it? And so he continues down in verse 3, and he says, "Knowing this." Now count it all joy, brethren, when you fall into various trials, knowing this. This is the thing you need to know, that if you know this, you're going to be able to count the joy. That the trying of your faith works endurance. Now that word trying there means to prove through trial. It's a metallurgy term. If you take metal and you melt it down so that you've only got the pure stuff left, that's what it means to try something. That's where the term comes from. And so we would use the phrase, we might say trial by fire. You know, we're here somebody, they've been through a trial by fire, where they went through something very difficult, and what it did is it burned all of the bad stuff off of them so that they came out the other side with a better understanding of life, a better understanding of the kind of person they want to be. That's what that word try means. And so he says, know this, that when you go through trials, that trial will try you. In fact, that's kind of the same idea, isn't it? What's a trial? It's a thing that tries you. It tries your patience. It tries your skill sets. It tries every aspect of your life. It presses in on you. But know that trying does something. That trying of your faith works endurance. Now, there's a couple of things we have to remember here. Not all trials bring endurance. Now, what I mean by that is people go through trials all the time. You go out in the world, and every single human being has been through some sort of trial, some big, some small. But not everybody who goes through a trial comes out better for it. Here we're told, what's the thing that makes you better for it? It's the trying of your faith works endurance. Now, the key here is, as once again, James is talking to Christians. If you are a Christian, if you go through a trial and remain faithful through it, now you go through and things get hard and you're hanging on, just barely hanging on by your fingernails, but you're hanging on and saying, "God, I trust you in this. I don't know how I'm going to get through this thing. I don't know how we're going to make it. I don't know how we're going to pay the bills. I don't know I don't know how we're going to get through this health scare. I don't know how we're going to raise our children." Whatever it is, whatever the trial is, you lose your job or any number of things. How are you going to make it through that? If you go through that trial and you say, "I'm going to be faithful. I don't know how God's going to see me through this. I don't know when I'm going to get to the other side. I don't know if it's going to get worse before it gets better." Reality check, it probably will. I don't know when it's going to end. I don't know any of those things, but all I know is this one thing. God's told me He'll take care of me. So I'm going to be faithful. I'm going to just take every day. Now, Christ said something about that. What should you do? Should you think, I'm going to handle the next week when you're going through a trial? Should you say, I'm going to take it 1 week at a time? Is that what Jesus said? No, He said each day has enough trouble of its own. 1 day at a time. And that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to just take it 1 day at a time, and I'm going to be faithful. If you do that, the trying of your faith works, it creates, it produces endurance. Now, I want you to think of it like this. When you are a brand new Christian, you have not really suffered for your faith at all. Not really. When somebody first becomes a Christian, they've really not had to go through very much at all. But then you look at somebody, they become a Christian, here's their patient zero. There's this right here at the beginning of their Christianity. And then you look at them 10 years later. Now, after 10 years of being a Christian, how many Christians have been through trials at that point? Pretty much everybody has been of some sort after 10 years of being a Christian. There have been times where your faith has been tried. And you look at somebody when they're a brand new baby Christian, and you ask the elders. You ask the elders. Somebody's just baptized. You ask the elders. You think they're going to make it? Are you going to see them in heaven? And what do the wiser Christians tend to say when somebody's just baptized? I hope so. Right? I want them to. But I don't really have any evidence one way or the other whether they're going to make it. In fact, Christ talked about that. When the seed is first planted, sometimes it falls in some shallow soil, doesn't it? And the person says, yay, I love the Lord, but it's real shallow, and as soon as the trials come, they're gone. But now, on the other hand, you take somebody who's been a Christian 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, so on and so forth, and you look at them, and they've lost their job, they had a health scare, they've raised children, those children have been good sometimes, they've been bad sometimes. They've gone through all sorts of varying trials in their life, and they're still there Sunday, they're still there showing up on Wednesday, they're still living by the Word to the best of their ability, and you ask other Christians and you say, do you think they're going to make it to heaven? And you have a little bit more confidence with that person, don't you? You take, you take Todd. Todd, how many years have you been a Christian? 29 years. 29 years. What do you think the chances are that Todd tomorrow's just going to just say, that's it, I don't care about the Lord and I'm done? Now, it's possible, right? It's possible for anything possible. But is it likely? No, it's not. 29 years this man has committed his life to the Lord. He's not going to throw that away in an hour, is he? But now you take somebody who hasn't been through trials, they haven't fought that good fight for a length of time, and you just aren't as confident about that, are you? That's what that verse is saying. Knowing this, that the trying of your faith produces endurance. There's one thing I know about Todd. He's got some endurance. He's going to hang in there. It's not a sprint for him. He knows, hey, we got a whole lifetime here to serve the Lord. Thayer's gives a great definition of the word endurance. I really liked it, so I just quoted it verbatim. It says, endurance is the characteristic of a man who is not swerved from his deliberate purpose and his loyalty to faith and piety by even the greatest trials and sufferings. That's endurance. Endurance is when it doesn't matter what they throw at you, you're going to keep on keeping on. And what James says is, how do you get that endurance? Isn't that what we all want? To have a deliberate purpose to our life, to be unswerving in our faith, to no matter what trials and sufferings come, I'm going to be faithful to the Lord. That's what we all want to be. Well, how do you get it? One way you get it. Just one way. Through that trying. Through those trials. So the next time you have a big trial in your life, I want you to think, I'm going to rejoice. I'm going to rejoice because this is turning me in to the person that is a man of the characteristic who is not swerved from his deliberate purpose and his loyalty. It's turning me into that person that will just be so fixed on the Lord that none can turn me from it. And that's the only way you're going to get that endurance. That's the only way it happens. You think about it, that's true in physical things too, isn't it? How do you get somebody who has the endurance to run 26.2 miles? You know, somebody going to go out and run a marathon, 26.2 miles. How do they get that? Well, they run shorter distances to start with, don't they? And when they start out, maybe they run 1 mile. Maybe they only run 1 lap around the track. Maybe that's where they start. I just start out with 1 lap. Now, they run 1 lap around the track, and they go, okay, I know I can make that. Guess what I'm going to try for next week? I'm going to go for 2 laps. And you get those victories under your belt, and you begin to get confidence, you get endurance, and then that's how you work up. That's how every runner works, is they start down here, and they work their way up to that 26.2 mile marathon. And so endurance is something that is only gained by trial. And so when we have trials as Christians, we can look and say, okay, it's going to give me endurance. I'm going to learn to be a loyal, unswerving person of deliberate purpose when I go through trials. Then he says down there in the next verse, verse 4, he says, and let endurance have its perfect work, that you may be perfect and entire, lacking nothing. Now, if you will let endurance work in your life, now that's a tricky thing to do. If you start praying tomorrow and you say, God, I want you to let endurance work in my life, what's the one thing you're guaranteed to have? You're going to get trials. And that's what we joke about. Don't pray for endurance. Don't pray for patience, because there's only one way you're going to get it. But if you say, okay, God, I want endurance to have its perfect work. I want endurance to complete me. You're going to go through trials, but if you're faithful, if you hang in there, sometimes just by the skin of your teeth, but if you hang in there, it's going to make you perfect and entire, lacking nothing. Now, that word perfect doesn't mean sinless. It just means full grown. I'll give you an example of how the word perfect doesn't mean sinless. Is over in Hebrews chapter 2, down in verse 10. It says that Jesus was made perfect through sufferings. Now, they're talking about that suffering that he had on the cross. Now, let me ask you, before Jesus was on the cross, was he sinless? Yes, he was. But Hebrews 2:10 says, when he was on the cross, he was made full-grown, complete, mature, in the sense of what was the reason that Jesus came down to live on this earth? It was to die. And until he had done that, he had not completed his work here, had he? So that suffering made him perfect. Didn't make him sinless. He was already sinless. But it made him complete. It matured his work here on earth. And that's what that word means here. Now, when you have endurance, that doesn't mean you're going to be sinless. It doesn't mean you're going to wake up one day and not sin anymore. No, it means you're going to grow up. Because that's the other things that trials do to you, don't they? They make you grow up. You can even take that, just take Gus. You know, Gus goes through trials every single day. He goes over here, he goes to touch something, and what happens? It sounds very different than that, actually. And whack! That's closer. Whack! And so that's trial for him. You know what he's doing? He's enduring right now. Every day he gets up, this little guy, and all he wants to do is just do everything. I just want to do everything. I want to touch everything. I want to see everything. I want to figure out how it works. I want to touch it, pull it, open it, close it, break it, put it back together. I want to do all of those things. That's all I want to do. He just wakes up with this excitement about life. And by the end of the day, his mother and I have beaten it out of him. That's his whole life. That's his life. And every day, that's all he does. He gets up and he says, oh, I just want to look at this thing. And can I touch this thing? And all we do is go, no, no, no. And so he goes through trials. But what's happening to him? One day he wakes up and goes, I just want to do everything. Ooh, not that thing. Don't want to do that thing. That thing goes whack. He's maturing. He's becoming a perfect young man. Just one trial at a time, isn't he? Now, if we're honest, if we're really honest with ourselves, we're just really no different than a little kid. None of us are. Every single one of us, I mean, when you think about the maturity of God and the maturity of Jesus, you think about the maturity of, let's take deity out of it. Just look at the maturity of those faithful who've gone before you. Abraham, David. Look at the maturity of those who fought that great fight of faith that you read about in Hebrews chapter 11. Where is your maturity compared to them? We're just a bunch of babies, aren't we? We got a long way to go. Well, how are you going to get from here to there? You're going to get there through enduring, through trials. And when you endure through those trials, it's going to have a maturing effect on you. You're going to grow up. And it's not going to happen just like that. Just like with Gus, it doesn't happen just like that. But then, bit by bit, these pieces start coming together, and then one day he wakes up and he has a better picture of what being a good little boy is supposed to be. He picks it up just one piece at a time, and then a little piece over here, a little piece over here, and just like a little kid, we do the same thing. We don't typically learn it the first time. How many times you got to take a lesson before you start learning it? I always think about Peter. How many times did Peter have to be told something before he got a lesson? If you look at the Bible, Peter had to go through something typically 3 times before he finally got it. And we're the same way. Just first time's probably not going to work, but you keep at it, and you're going to mature. You're going to grow up, and that's the way every Christian grows up. Is through trials, you gain that endurance, and that endurance works in you to make you full grown. Now, the next thing, it says you'll be perfect and entire. Now, entire is similar to perfect, but different. These two kind of are compatible with each other, but they each have a slightly different statement. Entire means to contain all its parts, all its pieces. Now, if you think about the character of being a godly person as kind of like a toolbox, well, what are you supposed to have in your character as a Christian? Well, I should probably have some patience. Let's put that in the toolbox. I should probably have a sense of justice, of right and wrong. No, let's put that in the toolbox. I need to have good social skills and with my fellow man. Now, let's put that in the toolbox. I'm going to need to have some love. I'll put that in the toolbox. I need some meekness. Got to put that in the toolbox. And so you just take all the characteristics of being a Christian. You think of each of them like a tool in a toolbox. What this says is endurance slowly puts those tools in. See, when you start out as a Christian, you probably have little to no skills at being a Christian. You might have some things you're naturally good at. We're all kind of naturally good at different things. But I mean skills where you've learned. You take the guy who's not naturally patient, but he learns to be patient. You learn. You get the person who's not naturally brave. The Bible says that's something in the toolbox. You got to be brave. And so they learn to be brave. Well, how do you learn those things? How do you learn to be patient? Trials. How do you learn to be brave? Trials. How do you learn to be meek? Trials. On and on. What it does is it not only makes you grow up, but it gives you these skills that you want. Have you ever looked at other people in the church and you said, boy, I just wish I could be like them? And you see some ability that they have that's just real impressive. Guess how you get those things? Trials, endurance, and then endurance has its perfect work. And when it has its perfect work, you lack nothing. So you say, okay, I want everything I'm supposed to have. I want to be lacking in nothing in my spiritual life. Only one way for that to happen. You're going to have to go through some trials. So when you start thinking about what trials do for your life, what they do in the long term, do you see how James can say, count it all joy? Because they're going to do something that nothing else can. It's like this magic pill that God gives us, and He says this is the only way you're ever going to get it into your thick skulls. And it's through trials. And if you'll embrace trials, And when you go into the next one, you just say, I am not going to necessarily like this, but I'm going to embrace it and find the joy in it. I'm going to wake up and I'm going to enjoy it. I'm going to enjoy the pain. I'm going to remember and learn from the pain because it's going to give me something that nothing else can but pain. That's James' point, is that it works within you, trials work within you, something that it's impossible to gain any other way. Anybody have any comments or questions? Okay, so now, as he finishes this up here, he says, lacking in nothing. Now, I want you to remember that word because that's his segue word. That's his transition word. Okay, brethren, count it all joy. These things are going to work in your life, and you're going to lack nothing. And that's what you want, right? You don't want to lack anything. You want to have everything that God would have you to have. Now, since you've decided you want to lack in nothing, now let's go to the next verse, verse 5. If any of you lacks wisdom, now you see what he did there? Trials, so you'll be lacking in nothing. Now, if you lack wisdom, let him ask of God. Now, what is he going to do here? Remember how I told you last class, I said James is a book that is about application to real life, and they're loosely connected. Just this thing over here, we'll talk about this for a little bit, and then we're going to go over and talk about this for a little bit. Then we'll talk about this thing for a little bit. And they're all applications to life, what real life Christianity looks like, but they're loosely connected. This is one of those. If any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask of God. This verse is going to tell you something really exciting. And it's so exciting because it gives you a window into the heart of God. Now, anytime you can read something in the Scriptures that tells you how God thinks and how God feels about you, that's exciting. That's the kind of thing that just should be thrilling to us because it tells you what your Creator's attitude towards you is. This verse is going to tell you what God thinks about you when you go through those times where you've got problems and you're confused and you don't know how to make a good decision. Now, if God were like us and He looked down on the problems that we have, the problems we think of as real big problems, if He were like us, He'd just be disgusted. Because think about it, don't you do this with people? Don't you see people's problems sometimes and you just go, oh, for crying out loud, that's just not even a problem. That's not a problem at all. You see that with, you take like little kids once again. When little kids come to you with a problem and they're just screaming and crying and just wailing and they go, what is wrong? You're thinking the house is burning down. They go, I got a splinter. You ever think about that? That's probably how we look like to God all the time. Here it is, we just scream and we wail and we cry and we complain and it's just our life is falling apart. But God, who sees things clearly, goes, well, that's just a little splinter you got. Why are you wailing like that? Now, if God were like us, He'd just walk around disgusted every time we had problems we didn't have the answers to. But this verse is going to tell you that's not how God works. Now, think about the problems that you have that you don't have answers to. Now, we're not talking about problems that you can just look to a verse and say, oh, that's simple. Should you be baptized? That's not the problems we're talking about here. Should you be baptized? That's something you need to hem and haw over. Oh, I just don't know. I don't know. No, Bible's clear on that one. This is dealing with problems like, should I take the job over here or should I take the job over here? Should I move to this city or should I stay in this city? Now, the Bible can give you wisdom as you read through it, but is there a verse that says, move to Tallahassee? No, there's no specific verse for that, is there? So you're going to have to take principles and put them together and try and do the wise thing. That's what he's talking about here. If any of you lacks wisdom, the ability to look at life and see ahead to how it'll turn out. If any of you lacks wisdom, these are things like health choices. So often nowadays, you go to the doctor and how many times have we heard somebody went to the doctor and the doctor said, well, we don't know exactly what it is. You could do this or you could do this. You could have this surgery, which will have these side effects. Or you could just wait it out and see if it gets better, but if it doesn't, you can have these problems. And so the person's left saying, okay, what do I do? Well, there's pros and cons to this one. There's pros and cons to this one. That's the kind of wisdom we're talking about here. Dealing with other people. You know, when you deal with other human beings, it's not always clear-cut, is it? You have these circumstances, and you have people, and you're talking to different people with different personalities, and you're trying to figure out the best way to say things, or the best way to present things, or the best way to deal with personality differences, or whatever it is, whether it be in a work environment or home environment. Well, that's a wisdom thing. Raising children. Bible's clear as day on raising children, isn't it? Raise them up in the fear and admonition of the Lord. It's just as clear as day on that issue. But if you've ever parented, have you ever noticed that one verse seems like it could get, you'd like a little more detail sometimes? Well, what about the application of that? You know, you get yourself in a situation where is it, you know, where's this point where I start to cut the apron strings? I say, okay, at some point every kid has to reach adulthood and mom and dad have to let them go. When do I do that? Where's the line? You don't want to do it too late. You don't want to do it too early. You do it too late, you're going to exasperate them. The Scriptures make it real clear you shouldn't do that. You do it too early, you feed them to the wolves. Scriptures say don't do that. It's wisdom, isn't it? Now, these are the things that we deal with and we struggle with day in and day out. Now, I want you to think about in any one of these things, when God looks down and you're saying, should I take the job here or take the job there? Do you think that's a real hard question for God? God, it's just a silly question, isn't it? Do you think He'd have a hard time coming up with the answer? What should I do with my kid over here? You're over here pulling your hair out, wondering, and you're just, what are we going to do? And do you think God would have any problem? He could fix the problem in about 3 seconds, probably, couldn't He? See, our problems are little splinter problems to God. And if God were like us, He'd just be disgusted. I can't believe He wouldn't have patience with us. That's what we do with people who we view as having small problems. We don't have patience with them. But what does God say? If any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask of God. And God says, just ask. Now, He doesn't say, don't bother me with your silly little splinter problems. I have angelic hosts to take care of. You think about the type of things that God's got? Can you imagine God's to-do list for a day? If you saw His to-do list for even 1 nanosecond, it would probably shut our mouths for a lifetime on our kind of problems we have to deal with. And yet, God doesn't say, I'm too busy for you. What does He say? If any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask of God. Just ask me. I want to help. Just pray to me and I will bless you. And then you look there, it says, if any of them lacks wisdom, let him ask of God, who gives to all generously and without reproach, and it'll be given to him. Now, the next thing He says He gives generously, that word there means without reservation. Now, without reservation, when you have reservations about something, that's when you stop and think about it. You know, your kid turns 16 and they ask for the car keys. And you might hand them over, but it's with reservation. Right? Okay. No, God, when we ask for wisdom, He just says, just ask. Oh, I'll give you the answer just as liberally as I can. I'm happy to give you wisdom. God wants to bless His children. He wants to help us through those problems that are sticky for us. And He says He gives it without reproach. He doesn't get disgusted with you for asking. He doesn't get to a point where He says, Scott has asked me 300 times today. Scott has prayed to me 300 times for wisdom in all of these silly problems he has, and he ought to be grown up by now. And so you know what? One of you angels take care of it. I'm just tired of hearing him. That's not what He does. It says He does it without reproach. He doesn't look down on us for asking for help. There's not a part of Him that looks at us as weak for asking for help. He thinks it's a good thing when you pray and ask for wisdom. When you say, okay, God, I've got this problem and I've looked at the Scriptures and I'm trying to apply these principles you give me, so God, just make it work out. Just help this thing to work together for good. I don't know how it's going to work out. I can't see everything. I'm going to try and do this, And if it's not the right thing, God, would you make it clear that it's not the right thing? You ever done that? Or you just pray and you say, I've got to make a decision, and I think this is the right one, but God, if I'm wrong, could you make it clear? Could you give me some wisdom so I wouldn't go down the wrong path? God doesn't get disgusted when you do that. There's no reproach there. He's happy to give it to you. And then it says, and it will be given to him. Now, there's not many times that you look at being guaranteed things in life. Guarantees are few and far between in life, but God says, if you ask for wisdom, if you come to me and you want wisdom, and you ask me to help you through these things, I'm going to give it to you. He gives it consistently. Now, the only thing He asks, He says, I'll just give it to you. You want an answer? You want it to be made clear what the right thing to do? I'll just give it to you. There will be no problem. I won't make you feel bad for asking. I'll give it to you. I'll make it clear. I love giving wisdom to my children. It's only one thing I ask of you. It says, let him ask in faith. So when you go to God in prayer and you say, God, I've got this problem, whatever the problem is, and I've been reading my Bible and I'm trying to apply these principles, but it's still not clear. You take like that career decision. Do I go and take this job over here, or do I stick with this job over there? Scriptures can give you some principles, but at the end of the day, it's going to be kind of a fuzzy thing, isn't it? There's no book of second opinions that tells you, take the Microsoft job and leave the Google job behind. But God says, if you pray to me in faith, I will give you the wisdom. I'll make it clear. I'll make it clear so that you can make it through that thing. And so that's the one thing He asks of us, is that we trust Him. That when we pray like we mean it. And we pray trusting that He will take care of us. And you think about it, how many times in life have you done exactly the opposite? Verse 6 says, but he must ask in faith without any doubting. For the one who doubts is like the surf of the sea, driven and tossed by the wind. For that man ought not to expect that he will receive anything from the Lord, being a double-minded man, unstable in all his ways. How many times in your life have you found yourself being an unstable person? You go through these decisions in life, and somebody says, well, have you prayed about it? And kind of in the back of your head, you go, well, that's not going to do any good. I mean, this is a problem. I got to fix this. I got to find the answer. And we trust our own wisdom, which is this tall. We got this much wisdom. And if we pray about it, it's kind of as an afterthought. Oh, yeah, I probably ought to pray about it. You kind of feel guilted into praying about it. But, I got to take care of this thing. He says, that kind of man is a double-minded man, and I'm not going to help that man. I'm just going to let him be unstable. Now, I think about, with me, all the times that I've made big decisions and I just kind of jumped in and I said, oh, I know the answer, and I didn't pray about it. I didn't ask God for wisdom in it. Just about every single time, that thing's ended up blowing up in my face. When Scott did it, off of Scott's own wisdom. Oh, I got this one figured out. I know, I'm real wise. It's just blown up. And that's what he says. He says, I'm not going to help a double-minded man. I'm not going to help somebody who says, yes, I trust in the Lord, but then lives like he doesn't. Who says, yeah, I want God's wisdom, but I already have my own wisdom. That kind of guy I'm not going to help. He's going to have to learn the hard way that he needs me, which, by the way, James already talked about. What's the way you're going to pick up that tool in your toolbox to learn to trust in the Lord? Trials. And how many of us have to go through trials before we start realizing, you know what, I really don't know very much, and I really need to trust in the Lord every step of the way. Trials will teach you that, won't they? And so he says, if you'll ask, though, but if you'll ask in faith, then I will take care of you. Okay, anybody have any comments or questions on that? Okay, and we'll move on here. Now, verse 9, we're going to switch and look at another topic here. But the brother of humble circumstances is to glory in his high position, and the rich man is to glory in his humiliation, because like flowering grass, he will pass away. So you take a poor brother and a rich brother. So yeah, I know. I was trying to think of the best I could think of, and I went all Disney. So you take the poor brother and you take the rich brother. Now, God says you're both brothers. So let's mark it down. In the church, does it matter what your bank account says? Is there some sort of caste system in the church? Now, the wealthy Christians, now they're something special. They get an extra dose of love. No, there's nothing about that in the Scriptures. Scripture says, no, you're all brothers. So if you're a brother of humble means, meaning you don't have a lot of money, or you're a wealthy brother, meaning you have a lot of prosperity, what should you do? Now, you're both equal in the eyes of God, but each of you is going to have your own struggles. And this is true. Money, whether you have it or you don't, brings struggles. You just mark it down, money brings problems. Now, you got to work with money. If you just say, I'm going to take money out of my life, well, good luck. You're going to have to deal with it. But whether you have a lot or you have a little, you're going to have struggles. So here, he says, now, there's a positive to both cases. Now, if you're a poor brother, he says, rejoice in your glory in your high position. Now, what does he mean by glory in your high position? He just got done saying you're a man of humble means. What humble means lowly. Glory in your high position. Now, his point there is that you're being exalted through the trials you're going through. Because remember what he just started the book by saying? When you go through trials, what does it do? It gives you endurance. It makes you perfect. It makes you entire. Now, if you've ever been at a time in your life where you didn't have very much money at all or you had no money at all, would you count that as a time of trial? When you've got that electric bill coming in and you don't know whether you're going to have enough money to pay for it. You know, you sit down for dinner and you say, okay, well, we have one bean. Let's split it down the middle. Here you go, honey. Do you consider that a trial? Yeah, it's a trial. Well, James said something about trials. Rejoice in it. So if you are a brother of humble means, if you're going through a time in your life where you don't have much, you just remember something. You got something to rejoice in. You're being made special. Now, we find this to be true in marriages a lot of times. I look back with Jen and I when we first got married and we had zero money. I mean, I literally, the very first year we got married, I'd never done taxes before, so we went down to H&R Block, even though it was about the easiest taxes in the world, I realize now, but at the time I didn't realize that. Went down to H&R Block, took all of our paperwork down there, and the gal looked at me and she literally said, "Where's the rest of it?" And I said, "That's all of it." She said, "You're lying." We lived in under $10,000 that year. And it was mostly because brethren were so good and kind to take care of us. But that was poverty. That was poor. But you know what? I look back on that, and that really made something out of Jen and I. It really did some really wonderful things for us. Some just great things for our marriage, for our attitude towards life, towards counting our blessings, towards learning to trust the Lord. And so I go, well, you know, I should have rejoiced in that because it was making me into something. And that's what James says, rejoice. Now, the rich brother, he should rejoice because he's humbled by the vanity of life. Now, here's what I mean by that. If you acquire $10 billion and you die the next day, how much do you take with you? None. They do not bring U-Hauls behind hearses. You don't get to take anything with you. That's it. And that's what he says here. James chapter 1, look what he says. Down in verse 10. The rich man is to glory in his humiliation, because like flower and grass, he'll pass away. For the sun rises with a scorching wind, and it withers the grass, and its flower falls off, and the beauty of its appearance is destroyed. So too the rich man in the midst of his pursuits will fade away. Now here I have two pictures of grass. Here's grass, a beautiful spring day. You know, it's the little buds, the flowers are starting to come out. Just looks gorgeous. And then this is just a little while later, probably not in our part of the country. We don't have enough sun to do that. But, you know, in other parts of the country where they give you enough sun, what is that? That sun that made those flowers come out and bloom, what does it do? That same sun. It burns it all up. It scorches it, and it dies. And it happens just like that. But when they were out, oh, those flowers were beautiful. Oh, they were great. I mean, think about it. You go out and the flowers are blooming and you can smell them and you can see them and the birds are chirping and it's just wonderful. It makes you want to frolic. And so you go out there and just, oh, this is wonderful. Ben, I was thinking of you when I said frolic. Ben likes to frolic through the fields. He was back there mocking me, so now I saw that. and so here it is, just gorgeous, and then that same heat burns it up. And you look at that scorched grass, and it's just nothing. It's worthless. Now, that's his point. You rich man, you glory in your humiliation. You glory in the fact that this thing that everybody says makes you so great, how special is it really? It's nothing. What really is money? It's just nothing. How many people have had millions of dollars and lost it overnight? That's just a story of history, isn't it? That's just the way history works. You can see that American history, you can see that world history. It's just gone like that. You can see people who were powerful dictators in charge of nations, and then what happens? They're deposed, and that's it. It's all gone. So we're told it doesn't take long for the beautiful to turn into the nothing, to just fade away. So if you've got wealth, you rejoice that God has taught you that lesson, because it's going to ground you. If you've got money, as really in America, how many of us really have to admit that we got money? Even if you are a poor American, you got money, don't you? Compared to the rest of the world, you thank God that He has grounded us as Christians into realizing it's worthless. It's just nothing. It's just a vanity. And so as you go through, that's what He says. See, whether you've got a lot of money or you don't have money, is that a big deal? No, you're going to gain something one way or the other. Now, if you're a poor brother, I want you to rejoice that God's using these trials to make you a better person, and you will be a better person for it if you'll live faithfully. And if you are a wealthy Christian, I want you to rejoice that you realize something that most wealthy people don't. That money doesn't buy happiness, that money does not buy your way into heaven, that money cannot buy you true friends. I want you to rejoice that you realize that what really matters in life has nothing to do with the dollar bill whatsoever, and rejoice in that humbling effect that life and death has on all of us. That you too will fade away, and that all those physical possessions will do you no good. Solomon has something to say about that. He says, here's a wealthy man, and he dies, and where's his money go to? Going to give it to a fool. The fool take that money, and some of that money that he's worked his whole life for, it'll just be gone in the pursuits of a second of a fool. Your money is of no value. What is of value is your character. Anybody have any comments or questions? Okay, then we'll stop there, and then we'll pick up down in verse 12 where we're going to talk about trials a little bit more.